Good day. I'm very happy to introduce to you our special guest for today, Dr. Mikamo, who is the world famous, one can say, author of the book A True Story 815, A True Story of Survival and Forgiveness from Hiroshima, and also a film based on the same documentation. She is the daughter of two survivors from Hiroshima, and she has, made available the memory of her family so that the world would have a warning. And I'm very happy that you are joining us today, the 80th anniversary of that horrible day of Hiroshima bombing, where the first nuclear bomb ever in history was put on a civilian, totally defenseless population. And I think, in light of the fact that we are today in a world where, unfortunately, the danger of nuclear war is very close, and there are many experts in the world who share my personal opinion that we are in a situation more dangerous than during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The reasons for which we can discuss. But I want to welcome you, Dr. Mikamo, and I want to ask you, can you tell us, the international listeners and viewers, what is your thought on that day, 80 years after the tragic events of Hiroshima?
Thank you very much, Helga, and thank you very much for having me. And hello, everybody. That I was watching the Hiroshima ceremony, and also our small nonprofit organization did a streaming event at the same time, and we have Yokohama Friendship Bell, because I'm based in San Diego, California, and San Diego is the sister city with the Yokohama city in Japan. And we have a big, like a temple bell. It's not a temple, but it's just a big bell in a park nearby the water here. And we always gong the bell at the 8:15 in Japan time, which is the time of the explosion of Hiroshima. So while they have the Hiroshima ceremony and gong the bell, we also gong the bell as well. And my hope is in the future that everybody in the world will gong the bell or ring the bell or just put down the weapons for a day, at least a second, and take a reflection moment that what we are doing. And there's so many things happen when we are very righteous that we have, as a human, we have a tendency to believe something we're doing is right and the other party is wrong, or the other party is threatening our righteousness. And that's how we kill each other. And it's a very, very sad thing. The tears came to my eyes on August 6th, Japan time. In Europe and North America, the Americas, it was almost August 5th, that just imagining how many tens of thousands of people were killed instantaneously and suffered. That my father was one of the very, very miraculously survived. If you see my movie, you will see it's a reenactment, so it's not the real scene, but we do have archives, the real pictures and videos as well, that in the movie, and you can imagine, but it is beyond imagination. We are trying to kill each other and annihilate the whole humanity by doing what we're doing right now, in many countries, in many regions in the world. So it felt so imminent. It felt very urgent on that day.
Well, I can tell you that in Berlin, there is a very important organization fighting for peace, and they also at 8:15 rang the bell this morning, and our members participated in that. So there are places around the world who are mindful of that incredible event. But unfortunately, I must say that, in a certain sense, Japan and Germany, for good or for bad, had a joint historical connection. I mean, I can only say in Germany right now, I'm absolutely shocked because, it is as if the memory of the destruction of the Second World War has been gone. There are still some old people who lived through that, but they don't speak out. And it seems that there are generations afterwards who somehow have completely put this out of their mind. And I'm asking you, is that the same thing in Japan, or are people more?
It is very much so. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is very much the same. The younger generations that I had a volunteer, high school volunteer, to work with me for the ceremony here for Hiroshima Memorial. And that high school student who is very industrious and studious and serious, she told me before she got involved in this movement and actual ceremony, Hiroshima was like French Revolution in her mind. So it's somewhere far away in the country, somewhere far away back in the history, or Napoleon, or some like medieval things that something you learn on the history book, nothing to do with her or her family or her life. But when she got involved in this ceremony and learned about my parents' stories and other things, she felt, wow, this could happen and I need to take it serious. So a lot of people that especially younger generations, they're kind of used to video games and killing things in the games. And so life and death, the notion and the sensations about life and death became such watered down. So it is very true. The younger generations don't know, and a little bit older, maybe middle-aged for generations are forgetting about it gradually as well.
Well, obviously, and I did watch your movie, which is really breathtaking, and I can only suggest to all our viewers that you absolutely must look at this video, this movie, because, it really gets across the absolute hopelessness that once you have a nuclear exchange, that's it. People are burning alive at 4,000 Celsius degrees, and the people who are in the center die immediately, then the radiation will kill people later. So I think the watching of your movie is an absolute must. But still, given the fact that you are a very accomplished psychologist from our previous discussions, I can say that, you know, I'm asking you this question: how can it be that a collective memory of nations, in that case Japan and Germany, can so evaporate? Because when you had the 80th anniversary of the Potsdam Declaration, and I was invited to give a talk about it at a conference. So I looked at some of the movies, the documentaries of the how Berlin looked like. Berlin was completely flat, rubble. Houses were just flat. And in the period before the last phase of the Second World War, people were running for their life. They were, dislocated. There were bombs falling every night. How can it be that people put this out of their mind so completely that they allow for the warmongers today to say things which could end up in the same and even more horrible way? I mean, you have thought about this a lot. What is your view?
Okay, there is a saying in Japanese, once it passes the throat, you forget about how hot the drink was, or drink or food was. And it is a human nature. And it's actually, from psychologist's point of view, it is actually an adaptive defense mechanism that we naturally have. We have had a certain hot painful event But once it has passed, we try to heal and we unconsciously try to forget about it. And I think that's what's happening as a collective humanity. We try to forget about it. However, that as John Hersey said, that what kept the world safe is the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to a certain extent. But then he wrote the book back in 50s or 60s. And since then, we as humanity unconsciously try to forget about it, forget about it, forget about it. And we have had massacres in the history. Luckily, no actual nuclear war, but we have come very close. And now, like you all know, the doomsday clock is 89 seconds. It was 90 seconds, but they had to move 1 second toward the midnight, and it is the closest ever in human history. So this issue is urgent, and we really need to advocate, especially young people, that we need to make a move now. As the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists would say, every second we don't do anything, we are getting close to the danger of annihilation.
Well, just a very short time ago, President Trump responded to some tweets from the former president of Russia, Medvedev, where he basically said, "Oh, I will now deploy 2 nuclear submarines closer to the borders of Russia." And at previous occasions, he had said, the United States has the biggest submarines and we have the biggest machines, as if these were, like toys, And I mean, what is so scary is that you have now leaders, unfortunately also in Germany, who are pronouncing, policies which, as a consequence could lead to an escalation with the largest nuclear power in the world, which happens to be Russia and not the United States. Even so, the difference may be irrelevant if it ever comes to a nuclear exchange. So, what can you say about what should the people do? Because I'm absolutely certain that if you would ask the majority of people, they would absolutely say never again, as they did 40, 80 years ago. And they would not want war because it's them who die in the war. But nevertheless, you have these political leaders who seem to gamble with the existence of their nations. What is your message to Germany in particular?
The Germany, from my understanding, the Germany has learned from the history and they have shifted the education for the children and youngsters that the the power in the war or conflict situation is not really the power. That it might be a defeat or it might be winning, but nobody wins in the war. The leaders may feel like they won because it's not their families or their immediate circle of people who most of the time are in danger. They send the troops. So I do think that Germany is one really good example who have learned from the history and actively working toward the nuclear free world and that as a country. So I think we need to think about that and we need to learn from that too.
Well, I I hear what you say, but I think from my point of view, it looks a little bit different because Germany has been praised a lot, uh, that we did look at our guilt in the Second World War and that it has been incorporated in the school education and so on. And that's true. However, it has been retrospectively limited and shifted primarily to the Holocaust. It did not discuss the damage done to the people of the Soviet Union, who lost 27 million in the Second World War. Naturally, they never mention what happened in the Pacific that has been fallen off completely. But even if you look at the Holocaust right now, I mean, given the fact that you have genocide going on in Gaza, the German position has been really, really, very hands off. Nobody dares to talk about it. Only in the last week or so, when the news became so overwhelming that nobody could deny it, there has been a certain shift. But still, I think they did not even stop sending weapons to Israel despite of it. But I mean, obviously, what follows out of all of that would be that one really has to review what actually happened. What was the history, and not have a selective memory which only suits the present narrative.
That's very true. I agree with you.
So we have now a situation where the danger is that it seems that global NATO is positioning a lot of missiles in the Pacific, around the Philippines, then also naturally in Europe, close to Russia, close to China. And just yesterday or so, the Russian Foreign Ministry put out a statement saying that they are also now no longer adhering to their unilateral obeying the former INF treaty. The INF treaty had been cancelled by President Trump in his first term. So, they are now placing all these medium-range missiles from both sides. I mean, isn't that inviting trouble in the short term?
Yes, it's very much so. I don't know if you have watched and heard Hiroshima Prefecture governors, Yuzaki, Yuzaki, Yuzaki is the governor, his peace declaration at the Hiroshima peace ceremony, that he talked about nuclear deterrence as a myth, that it's just an idea, it's not the real thing, that nations and leaders might think that if a certain country has nuclear weapons or interballistic missiles to carry the nuclear hits, that would deter other countries to use weapons. However, the history has shown a lot of times those deterrence theories have been broken by either egotistic leader or rather uninformed or unintellectually sufficient leaders, or by mistake or something else, that has been broken and the wars have happened. Well, not the nuclear ones except for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but in the history of human, that there have been many wars and conflicts because deterrence didn't work. And it could take just one mistake or one wrong decision or one not reasonable leader to put us in the danger of the dooms. So I strongly recommend that it is available in English as well. In the media, you can search for Governor Yuzaki, Yuzaki, Peace Declaration. And I would like everybody to read it. And it is very direct. And it's the message that everybody should really take it to the heart.
Well, it seems that the idea is that you can actually have a tactical nuclear war. And I personally believe, that is an illusion as well. Ted Postol, who is probably the world's best nuclear expert, he wrote many books about the topic, and he made the argument that it is the logic of nuclear weapons that once you use one, the likelihood that they all will get into play is almost 100%. And naturally, if that happens, then that is ending life on Earth, because in all likelihood a nuclear winter would follow and all life would disappear. Given the fact that the warning time is, I don't know exactly, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or somewhere in that vicinity. I mean, what is your view about the possibility to have a tactical nuclear war? Do you think that that is at all possible or not?
I think it is always a possibility. The probability may not be high, hopefully, but it is always possible. As long as we have nuclear weapons in possession somewhere on Earth, even one, there's always a danger. And the nuclear abolition is the only way for humans to survive as a humanity. That's what my belief is.
Is the statement which was made last November at a meeting of the CSIS in Washington, where Admiral Buchanan, who I think he was the commander of the Strategic Command of the United States, I'm not entirely sure now, but in any case, he made a statement saying that he thought that the United States could win a tactical nuclear war. They just and the reason why it would be legitimate was to keep dominance in the world, and the only reservation he made was to say, we just should make sure that we have enough nuclear weapons to then still have the dominant position afterwards. I mean, in my view, this is such a unbelievable statement, and then there is no comments. The mainstream media are not commenting on that. The main politicians around the world are not making a wide distancing of that. So, I think that still stands there, that, there may be people in high positions in the Pentagon. I don't think President Trump has revoked that statement, or, basically said that he is not following this. So, I mean, that is so unbelievable, and there is no discussion about it.
That's true. It is, well, I don't know enough about policies. I'm a psychologist and I work with the human psyche, and I'm not a technical, I'm not, sorry, I'm not a expert in the policies and politics. However, the people,
I was saying that the the announcement that the U.S. was able to fight a tactical nuclear war just to make sure that they had enough nuclear weapons afterwards to keep the dominant position in the world. And I was asking your comment.
Mhm. Yes. So should I repeat what I said? The whole thing? Okay. Okay. So when they talk about those technical wars and who has more and who has more advanced nuclear weapons, that they're all talking and looking at things from the above mushroom cloud. That we all know the pictures of mushroom cloud that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And people look at it and people think about it and people look at things from above the nuclear mushroom cloud and say, oh, we should drop it, we should keep it, we should make it, we should not drop it. That's what we see or they see. But what happens under, beneath the mushroom cloud is the actual things that humans go through. And they don't really think about that. So it is extremely important, in my belief, that people, especially of young generations who may become leaders of the world in near future or in the future, to learn about what has actually happened, what humans went through underneath the mushroom clouds. And there are some stories and documents, but there are not many, the first person accounts of what has happened because they didn't survive. Within the 100% demolition zone, which is about 2 miles radius, 1.75 miles, or maybe 2,000 kilometers radius in Hiroshima, more than 99% of people who were outside either died immediately by becoming charcoal or evaporating and just almost melting if they're outside immediately or within 48 hours. So not many people survived from that proximity. And my father and my mother as well are the ones that are very, very miraculously able to survive. And so it is really important for us to remember and learn about their actual experiences, just to be aware what happens under the mushroom cloud.
Well, I can confirm that, while the Oppenheimer movie got a lot of notoriety, they completely leave out exactly that side what you are describing. And given the fact that it is the people who will die if we don't avoid this danger, I really would like very much to invite you to come to Europe, because I think that Europe right now is on a trajectory which is, I can only say, if we don't change it, it could become suicidal. And I think, would you be willing to come to Europe and give talks about your experience and your book and your movie?
Yes, I would be delighted. Delighted is not the right word, but I would be honored and very, very glad to do that. That Europe, I actually love Europe. I went to an international business school in France, and I have interacted with a lot of Europeans, and I have been to Europe probably more than 60 times, and but not with this purpose, that I haven't had an opportunity to work with an organization or community or school to show my movie or give a talk and share the stories in my book. I would really love to do that.
Well, I must say that the way you have worked through this personal experience of your family and your life is extremely to be admired, because I also believe that we have to eventually arrive at the higher level of the sublime, that we have to be able to forgive, because if we don't do that, the cycle of violence will continue to escalate. And we see right now, I would say, in large parts of the world, an increase of violence and mindless violence, of, a plunge into barbarism of humanity. So I think this message you are conveying about the need to educate your emotions and become more loving, I 100% agree. The only problem is right now, I mean, we have right now to wake the world up, because I'm really thinking every minute, every day almost, what can be done to bring humanity away from the abyss. So if you have any words of wisdom on that point.
Well, I don't have a magic wand or a magic pill to change everything. So, but the educating in formal way and informal way within the family, parents learning about the emotional intelligence, parents learning about compassion and forgiveness and how to show that in a difficult situation. That if you have a quarrel with the neighbor, what do you do? Do you just hate and pout and tell the children how horrible the neighbor is? Or do you look at it from a different perspective and teach the children how to live with, how to interact with the people with different beliefs or different, perspectives, and that makes a difference. So if we can reach the parents and the leaders and the children and youth to really shift the mindset, even when you feel wronged. Yes, justice needs to be served, and that's a different thing. And, hopefully the society and the legal system will do the justice. But emotionally, we have a choice to become a little bit higher being. I don't mean the higher, but as a human, and a little bit higher level of development emotionally, to look at things from different perspective and learn from it and really give back to the humanity. That's what I firmly believe. That's the only way I can think of.
Well, I wish that some politicians who have given up on diplomacy altogether would listen to your words, because if you eliminate diplomacy and negotiation and talking to the other side, then naturally the only thing which is left is an escalation of the spiral of violence. So I really would like to invite you to come to Europe and, preferably before it is too late, because I'm really extremely concerned that we are on the wrong path right now in Europe. The whole idea of militarization, rearming Europe, of trying to outdo Russia in terms of weapons, which I think is a futile effort, given the technological advances Russia has made, and that it's a vast country, nuclear power. They have now the Oreshnik missile, which is there's no defense against it. So the very idea to try to solve this conflict without diplomacy is just completely crazy. So if you have any final words for our international audience, but especially the European one, I would ask you to say.
Okay. The Schiller Institute and its affiliated organization is kindly hosting the film screening on August 16th in New York. So people who are in the East Coast, that I hope people can attend. And actually, I would like to meet in person this time. And I believe it's also streamed globally as well. So I would invite all of you to watch my film and listen to my talk and other experts talk afterwards, and think about that what actually happens and what we need to do. And it is not somebody else's story. It's not about some other country's struggles. It's our matter. And I want everybody to feel like we need to take this in our own hands. And that I really hope I will meet many of you in Europe when things are arranged and I'm able to come to give a talk and maybe share the film, that I'm looking forward very much to it.
Well, thank you very much. We will work very hard to make your tour come true in the near future. So, Dr. Akiko Mikamo, I'm sorry. I thank you very much for your efforts, because I think it's so important for the mankind to wake up to hear you. Thank you so much.
Helga, thank you very much, Holly.
Bye bye. So, Harley, you wanted to comment on all of this.
Well, I think there's some questions that came in from the chat room from Germans who are confirming what you're saying, that they need to hear this, they need to see it. One of them wrote, my question is, why is everyone claiming that Germany's denazification worked while we're pushing war against Russia again? A point that you're making. And another one wrote, it's absurd. People are sleepwalking. They don't want to distress. They don't want to get into trouble. So I think the time is ripe for this movie and this discussion to take place inside Germany, especially with the bellicosity coming from the Merz government.
Well, I mean, the 80th anniversary is not just that of Hiroshima and the first nuclear bomb, and then 3 days later in Nagasaki, but it's also, the 80th anniversary of the Potsdam Declaration. And I was recently looking into this period of history and the treachery, coming from Churchill and from Truman, who, while talking, on the one side about the geographical and political reorganization of Germany and the whole post-war order, they were already given orders to start a Cold War and potentially a hot war, with Truman giving the order for the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki while they were talking in Potsdam. I mean, one really has to consider that. And, Churchill preparing a preemptive attack on the Soviet Union, which didn't take place, but it was in planning, the Operation Unthinkable. So I think that, if now the Russians are basically saying that Germany and Europe are returning to be something like a Fourth Reich, well, I think one should not just push this aside because it has consequences. I think Foreign Minister Lavrov said that they will take this into account now in all of their planning. I mean, that should really get people off the seat, in a real, in a real worry about it, and not push it aside. But I think we need to really review this entire period of history.
Well, in addition to Dr. Mikamo's book, which I think provides a very clear picture to people what actually occurred, we just did something that was released today, which is very significant, which is the LaRouche Organization white paper on the Gabbard declassification. Because what we pointed out is a point you were just making, which is that the same British initiative after World War II, the Operation Unthinkable, which was to continue a war against the Soviet Union, is governing US policy towards Russia today, especially with Trump announcing that he will go ahead with these sanctions against India to try to get India to stop supporting Russia. So it's, in a sense, an unbroken continuity of policy that people don't know about.
Yeah, and I was when I was doing my studies in Berlin many years ago, I was actually looking in the policies of the occupying power. And there were lots of things which are not reported in the official history, like, for example, that there was a conscious lowering of the living standard of the German population in this period, but also the famous 5 Ds, the denazification, demilitarization, and 3 more such Ds. It did not really do the job because now studies were done recently by certain universities who found that, the famous Persilschein, the famous, document testifying that people were not Nazis, were given out rather freely, and a lot of people were integrated into old positions. So the whole question, where does this come from in Germany, that all of a sudden this Russophobia, which is like an obsession, which has gripped certain people, which the Russians understandably attribute to that old Nazi mentality, it has reappeared. So, I mean, obviously, this is a very complicated history, but I think we need to have a real direct look at what happened in the post-war period afresh, because I think if we don't learn from this history, we are condemned to repeat it.
Well, and one other aspect of this is the German continued support for the Netanyahu Greater Israel policy of extermination of the Palestinians. And if the Germans learn something from the Holocaust and the complicity now with the Israeli killing, it isn't showing up. And there's a question for you that I got earlier. Someone just asked the question of, do the Germans have access to the videos of the killing going on in Gaza and the West Bank? Because there's now a blowback coming from the Israeli population, the peace movement, senior officials who are saying this must stop. But in Germany, there's a continued, I think Germany's the second or third largest contributor to Israel's giving weapons. So is there a recognition at all of the hypocrisy of the German position, on the one hand toward Russia and on the other hand toward the Palestinians?
Well, I think I would basically differentiate it. I mean, if you already have a prescience of what's going on, it is very easy to find the coverage, to find the video footage, because it's all over the internet. If, however, you are strictly believing what the mainstream media pro-NATO narrative is saying, then you only say the crimes committed by Hamas on the 7th of October, and you are not looking behind that. So I would say that the German population is being divided very much on that point between those who do not want to look at it, and it seems that our chancellor is belonging to that category almost, and those people who already are aware of the unbelievable atrocities going on. And so I can only say, there has been a shift in the last 2 weeks, because I think the truth cannot be hidden anymore. So I think we are in for some big surprises in the short term.
Let me throw one more thing out to you, Helga, because this is something that you responded to very strongly, what Dr. Mikamo said about the need to have a love of mankind rather than a vengeance and a revenge factor. We have a question from someone who said, and I think this is an area where you can answer to help bring some closure to people who think this way. The question is, what has humanity done to deserve continued existence? How would you answer that?
Well, I happen to believe that Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz was absolutely on the mark when he said that there is a pre-established harmony in the laws of the universe, which mean that whatever evil happens, it will evoke the power for an even greater good. And I think that if you look at the entire evolution of the universe at large, but especially also the history of humanity, I mean, it's not like a straight line, where things get better all the time and it's just a linear development. No, there are huge setbacks, and there are historic ups and downs and dark ages and renaissances. But if you look at the arc of history over a longer period of time, you can see that the principle is to bring order out of chaos, to bring more differentiated knowledge, to even bring more elevated emotions. That I believe that mankind is capable of becoming everybody a genius and everybody a beautiful soul. I believe that the present moral crisis is just the effect of oligarchism. Oligarchism tends to breed evil. Like if you look at the Roman Empire, where they controlled the population by evoking evil feelings, by making them, participating in the decision if somebody should live or die. People would sit in the circus, and then they would, thumbs up would mean, the gladiator could live, thumbs down would mean the gladiator has to die. And by integrating the population in such disgusting decisions, they would evoke the lower sentiment. So the oligarchy depends on evoking evil in people, and it makes people more evil if they don't have this inner freedom to be determining and self-deciding. But I think that if you get rid of the oligarchy, which I think eventually will happen, then there is a natural tendency of people of wanting to become better. And if you even have an environment among states, trying to encourage each other's developments, like the BRICS countries are now trying to do among themselves, I think one can create an international environment where the natural tendency of the good in people will become stronger, and eventually evil will vanish, because I believe evil is not, we are not living in a Manichaean world where good and evil forever will coexist. I believe that evil is the result of a lack of development, and that's a good thing, because that means through development it can be overcome and eventually eliminated. Because I think man is a creature of reason, and there is no reason why you cannot develop your mind in such a way that you don't need these crimes and stupid things which are going on so rampantly today. So my basic view on the matter is an extremely optimistic one.
We have time for one more question. The one just came in. Someone wrote about Witkoff, the envoy of Trump, meeting today with Putin for 3 hours. And he wrote, apparently, while Trump may not have patience, Witkoff does, and certainly Putin does. Is it too late for Trump to meet with Putin to resolve the outstanding questions?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm very glad about your question, because the Schiller Institute is currently circulating an appeal to President Xi Jinping, President Trump, and President Putin that they should meet at the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in the Pacific. On the 3rd of September, there will be a big parade in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, a military parade, and it has been reported that President Putin will attend that. And there has been a lot of discussion before, when will President Trump visit China? And I think that it would be so absolutely important. It would be a historic chance, like not a second one, if the 3 presidents would attend this military parade 80 years after the end of the Second World War, and use that occasion to revive the memory of why that should never happen again. Never again fascism, never again war, and at the same time, act as responsible leaders who are the most important people for the fate of humanity, and they should straighten things out. So if you agree with that approach, then please read this appeal, sign it, and circulate it in the widest possible way, because I think if we can generate a popular demand, that people demand that these leaders meet, I think we can hopefully catalyze it.
And one more question for you: that you commissioned the LaRouche organization to draft this white paper to go through what Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, was exposing in terms of classified documents which showed that the whole Russiagate story was fabricated. Now, the document that we've put out is a starting point to give people an understanding of what's behind this. But if you could just say something about this long-term approach coming from London to destroy Russia, and why the Gabbard initiative is so important, and why people should take the white paper and use it to, along with this petition you just mentioned, use it to intervene in history.
Well, because, the facts, what Tulsi Gabbard has now produced in presenting 2 batches of documents to the public proves that, you know, it was the British, the Hennigan, the former boss of the CGHQ Secret Service, and also Sir Dearlove, the former head of the MI6, who instigated the whole Russiagate affair. Christopher Steele had a big role in it, who was an agent of these people. And they basically ruined the first administration of President Trump because they wanted to prevent that Trump would make good on his promise to normalize relations with Russia. And they completely destroyed the first presidency of Trump. Now, obviously, you know, this is a very important thing for Trump because, you know, he wants to have a historic record as a peacemaker. And, you know, right now he is being surrounded again by people who are trying to flood the zone. That's the formulation used by the former British ambassador in Washington, that they have to surround Trump with people who are pushing him in the line of confrontation with Russia and China. So given the fact that the real issue is not just what happens to Trump or what happens to the relationship with Russia, but it is the war policy, which is a continuity, as we discussed it before, from Churchill's time, Operation Unthinkable, and the unholy influence Churchill had on Truman after Franklin D. Roosevelt had died at the wrong moment, basically not being able to determine the post-war order as he had intended, but it was done by Truman under the influence of Churchill. So the real issue is the war or peace issue, and that is what is at stake with the Russiagate papers. So I can only encourage you, download these papers, read them, translate them in whatever language you need them in, and make sure that they inform people, because, you know, that is the issue of war and peace.
This war and peace issue, another meeting, Zoom meeting of the International Peace Coalition this Friday. Do you have any indication yet of what the discussion will be there or who will be there?
This will be extremely important because, you know, not only is the ongoing crisis in Gaza a topic, we will have a former US military officer who was recruited to the humanitarian foundation, you know, being part of the genocide going on in Gaza. Is a former decorated US military person. His name is Thomas Agulia. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And also Scott Ritter will be there, Ray McGovern. So discussing the general strategic situation. So absolutely join the International Peace Coalition, because we have to make that forum, which meets every Friday on, since more than 2 years without interruption, and which is trying to unify the international peace movement. We have to make that an absolutely strong force, even stronger than it is already. I mean, there are thousands of people who have participated in it already over these 2 years, but it has to become a force which cannot be overheard. So join it on Friday, 5 o'clock, and meet all of these extremely knowledgeable people.
And that's 11 a.m. Eastern time. So Helga, thanks for bringing on Dr. Mikamo and having that discussion with her, the incredible power of the expression of a love of humanity in the face of horrors, and it's that basis on which we can overcome these terrible developments that continue to happen. So thanks for your involvement. Thanks to Dr. Mikamo, and we'll see you on Friday.
Yes, and if you who are watching have some ideas for Dr. Mikamo to appear in Europe, do not hesitate to contact us, because we would really love to put such a tour together as quickly as possible.